All right, so welcome again, everybody. Pier Andrea here calling in from Kota Kinabalu, Malaysia. Thanks for joining us today on this Knowledge Cafe on decolonization of knowledge, an action plan for km4dev with a special focus on Asia, Australia, and the Middle East. As we start, a small disclaimer, we're recording the meeting, so be aware of that. That's, I guess, standard practice. What have we briefly about the meeting? So as you know, this is part of the km4dev Knowledge Cafe series that km4dev community is holding on a monthly basis. For this month, we changed slightly the timing of our meeting to indeed accommodate people in different time zones. Doesn't seem to work for everybody. Some people like to wake up really early anyways, but we're glad that we can still cover all the globe in a way. We had, as a km4dev community, we had previous conversations and cafes around this topic on decolonization of knowledge. And as I said, this event here especially focuses on the Middle East, Asia, and Australia. And together with km4dev, we're very happy that this event is co-organized and brought together with Bruce from the Real KM magazine. In case you're not a member of km4dev or you want to subscribe to the Real KM magazine, you'll find the link in the chat. We'll circulate them also afterwards. I hope if you haven't joined us as part of the community, or if you haven't yet subscribed to Real KM, that you will do so after the meeting. So what do we have on our agenda for today? Right after this slide, I'm going to hand over to Svrividya, who is going to facilitate, co-facilitate the rest of the meeting together with me. She's going to provide a quick introduction on the topic, just to bring everybody up to speed. As I said, we had, as km4dev, the previous conversations on this topic. So Gladys will share with us some of the key points that have been emerging from these previous conversations. We'll then have our first speaker, Navid, who's going to talk about active versus passive approach in the decolonization of knowledge. Just a brief talk, and after that, and a bit of conversation, we'll move into the first round of breakout. We'll then hear from Bruce, our second speaker. We'll look at what km4dev can do in promoting and supporting the decolonization of knowledge. Another round of breakout, and that will bring us to the next steps and closing. If you'd like to stay with us at the end of the meeting, we're going to do a bit, well, we'll keep the room open for a bit of networking and also for our after action review to review how we did and what we can improve, what we can learn and improve for our next cafe. So with that, I'm now handing over to Svrividya. I'm going to mute myself and I'll come back in a bit. Svrividya, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Pier. So welcome. My name is Svrividya Harish. I work for ActionAid International and I'm based in Bangalore, India. And I'm your facilitator for the day. So just for people who are new to the topic itself, what exactly do we mean by decolonization when we say we need to decolonize knowledge and the field of knowledge management? And km4dev needs to come with a framework or something concrete to address this challenge. So decolonization is a political project, and decolonization of knowledge actually started with the academia. So with universities being challenged to say that they are extremely US and Eurocentric in the models and the narratives. And you need to give equal importance to indigenous and diverse models, theories, knowledge. It was also as a challenge, as you can see from the map that we are showing, the research production, if you look at it, there is, US is bloated here, where you can see that the Africa is almost, narrowed down. And you can see how it's so unequal in knowledge production. So if knowledge is power, you can see how power is working in the world today. So there is a need to challenge this too. So moving on from that, now when we speak about decolonization, we are speaking decolonization is various fields. We are speaking about decolonization in aid. We are speaking about decolonization in knowledge management per se. This is one proverb from Africa. We have a lot of African colleagues that I really, really liked, which kind of gives you the spirit behind this political project, as I called it. So it says that until the lion tells his side of the story, the tale of the hunt will always glorify the hunter. So it is so important that you get all the perspectives of a particular story. Otherwise, the heroes and the villains of the project, the protagonists and the antagonists, will never ever be challenged. And especially we have Navid from Iran and a lot of colleagues joining us from Middle East. And you see, the way Israel-Palestine issue plays out in the global narratives, or any other issues where that as a development community we are interested in. You can see how knowledge shapes narratives and how power, who has the power and who has not. So that's why it's quite important that we start with this process, and we will hear all your ideas on how exactly can we accomplish this as individuals and as communities. So before that, just to remind us that this is not the first time we are having this discussion. We have some contributions that is coming from the previous cafes that are there. So I'll just hand over to Gladys to give us some themes, emerging themes that are from previous sessions. Gladys.
Thank you so much, Svrividya. So today we are going to look back the relays from the previous decolonization and knowledge conversation. This has been an interesting theme for us at km4dev, and we are so happy many people really contributed. So yeah, I'm now going to share about the relay from the previous team members. So there's a quote about colonization of the mind, so decolonization should also be of the mind. So we need to decolonize our mindsets when we discuss the issues on decolonization of knowledge. So let's now check the relays from the previous members which shared regarding their action. So in this area, many individuals share their actions like, okay, as me, Gladys, what is my action plan in decolonization of knowledge? And there are many individuals who share their thoughts in terms of that we need to decolonize our language. Today, if you go back to your village, there are some languages that our marginalized communities, they don't understand. We need to take this knowledge back to home. And then the next session, we need to share the inputs with the local communities. And in the last knowledge cafe, we were discussing about decolonization of knowledge in the water sector. That many communities were not understanding what was happening. The research is not even in their language. So yeah, it's a challenge to all of us. The research that we are doing, we need to make sure that our communities accesses this language. And then we need to promote the literature from the region. As Svrividya was sharing about that in the global south, we are still lagging behind. So it's a challenge to all of us to make sure we share as much as we can, we promote the literature. We need to contribute a lot. And we have a km4dev, which has given us a platform where we can contribute our literature. Yeah. And then we need to celebrate what we have as a community. And we are so happy that, yeah, even in our blogs at km4dev, we are celebrating the contributions of other members. Next slide. And then we need to be ambassadors, be loud and be proud. And I'm proud to be a member of km4dev. I am always shouting to make it loud. Even in my village, like everyone asks me, what is km4dev? What is this decolonization of knowledge? So we need more brand ambassadors. Let's raise the flag of km4dev higher. And then now, what can we do as km4dev? km4dev is you and me. What is our actions? First of all, we need to intergenerational connections, particularly involving young people. And I'm so proud I'm that young person who is being involved. and other young KM members, you're welcome. I encourage all the young people, join, welcome. And then the next step, we need to, as km4dev, provide a mentoring session, and we are so happy. Some of us who are young people, we have received a lot of support from our elders in KM, yeah, Sarah, Helen, and Charles Tewa, and all other elders in km4dev. So we encourage young people kindly join and access such kind of opportunities for the mentorship. And then we need to recognize storytelling. Kindly tell your story. Share what is your story when it comes to issues of decolonization of knowledge we learn from you. Next. And then km4dev Declaration on Decolonization of Knowledge. And today your action counts, your voice matters. So let's share. Yeah, and be part of the action plan for the km4dev. And then also there's checkpoints and the tools. And we are so happy we have the km4dev blogs where you can share about this, contribute your ideas. And then I need to hand over to Svrividya to share with us. And then also we have our km4dev channel. Kindly be part of it and share your issues and contributions towards a decolonization of knowledge. And together we can advocate for change. Together we can be ambassadors, yeah, in contributing to this hot topic on decolonization of knowledge. So now I need to hand over to my colleague, Svrividya. Welcome, Svrividya.
Thanks so much, Gladys. So, welcome again, everybody. So we have a very short kind of talk by our experts today. We had a nice conversation in the km4dev email group about what does expertise actually mean. So we have Navid Nezafati with us, who is going to talk to us a little bit about what is happening in Iran, Middle East. Dr. Nezafati is a graduate in industrial engineering, and now he's the management faculty at Shahid Beheshti University, which is one of the most prestigious universities in Iran. Dr. Nezafati is the first developer of knowledge management initiatives in Iran, and he has implemented knowledge management solutions in different industries, oil companies, mining organizations, IT, and more. So he has established MTA consulting company, and he has like more than 100 knowledge management projects in Iranian industry. So we are very, very proud to have Navid here with us. So over to you, Navid. Welcome.
Okay, thank you, Svrividya. Okay. Do you hear me clear?
Yes, loud and clear. Go ahead.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for having me at this valuable event, and I hope to share my national experience about knowledge management in the context of knowledge decolonization, especially active versus passive. It is the matter, I think. Shall we think only about decolonization as a challenge or as an opportunity? In the passive approach, we have to always think about exact copy and paste the solutions. By that, the main matter is how can we use the exact solutions in Western companies or companies in developed countries. But our experience in Iran introduce an active approach that we chose thinking and looking inside as opportunities and assets. We have particular culture, issues, and challenges, and at the same time, localized solutions. These solutions could cover these features in our country and economy. Our journey in knowledge management in Iran started 15 years ago. At that time, knowledge management was almost only an academic issue, and industries and companies in Iran didn't know it clearly. On the other hand, they struggled with some challenges that liaised with and related with knowledge management directly, like the tremendous amount of the retired people and staff, repetitive failures, chaotic development, and messed up documents. They had sensed clearly those suffering points, but simultaneously they didn't believe in knowledge management and thought about that as a luxury imported commodity. Therefore, we threw away frames and models and exactly focus on those pain points. At least we threw away from our showcases, not in our mental model. Our journey about knowledge management started with knowledge acquisition from retired experts with some creative and localized methods. In that time, it was so essential with lots of tangible outcomes for industries and their managers. Then we developed a dedicated software to circulate lessons learned and question and answers smoothly in many Iranian companies. I remember in that time, one of the knowledge management gurus asked me, Navid, why you embed many evaluating systems and also badging and scoring systems in your software? Our software in that one called MTA Share. And I answered him, because here is Iran, and Iranian people encourage a lot by evaluating and scoring. Maybe it would be interesting for you that one of the bestseller knowledge management books in Iran is the book that was written by me. Maybe you can see it here. And it is only a storybook. It is only a storybook, a story about a factory owner with problems in knowledge management. You can see lots of cartoons, lots of humor parts here, some of challenges about knowledge management, and it was completely influential. And I think this success owes to adaptation with Iranian culture, because Iranians love storytelling, and it is an inherited knowledge management method from our ancestors. I have lots of examples like that we changed or manipulated or re-engineering knowledge management frameworks and solutions for knowledge management localization in Iran. And exactly after a while, we witnessed great return of investments, not only in cost, but also in other important indicators, for example, frameworks, time frames, innovation, creativity. We had recorded up to 30% reduction in cost, and in some cases, 40% reduction in repetitive works. I believe this approach that we have done in Iran and our endeavors in Iran to localize knowledge management solutions and to get the return locally might be assumed as a best practice for the knowledge decolonization approach in Middle East, maybe. Active approach in compare with passive approach. As Gladys said, we want to be loud and proud as decolonization ambassadors in knowledge management and also knowledge management for dev. Thank you all people for arranging and holding this great situation for us. Thank you for hearing me, and I'm ready for further questions if you have. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Navid. So we have like
the restriction time.
Thanks so much, Navid, and for making that point about how it is so critical when we say decolonizing knowledge. It's also contextualizing the whole knowledge management field to our particular geographies and the context we find ourselves in. Do we have any questions or any suggestions or comments? So Lata Narayan Swami, can I call upon you?
Yes, hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
So thank you for the invitation, and thank you for bringing the session together. This is sort of an area and set of issues that is very close to my own heart. I think what's striking for me, Navid, in what you've sort of talked about, and I won't want to talk too long because I think there's plenty to discuss. But I think what's interesting about what you've raised is the fact that knowledge management on its own is actually quite diverse. So how we think about the way that we know is obviously context specific, but it also needs to be, so context is not just about geography. So you're describing the ways in which you've worked in industrial contexts and sort of trying to think about, you're making links between the way you think about knowledge and particular outcomes for particular, private sector endeavors, which is quite different, I think, to broader questions around what we mean by knowledge and development. Now, that doesn't mean that those things are unrelated, but I'm struck by the diversity of experience just looking at the chat and the diversity of experience that people are bringing into this space. And I suppose if I had a question, and thinking about what that would mean for a KM dev community, is what is it that brings everybody together in this community around knowledge? Because everybody is bringing different types of experience, different contextualized, geographical, sectoral, disciplinary, professional kind of expertise. And then what does that mean for us? Because actually, one of the things that decolonizing is actually asking us to do is, at least in the way that I sort of think about it and challenge myself to do, is to unpack some of those terms. So what does it mean to be an expert? What is it about your context that matters in how you know? Could it ever be said that I know everything or enough about a context to be able to think about what knowledge might mean in that context? Who do I have to ask, and who has to be included in order for me to understand that context properly? But even more basic things. So, we talk about language, and that's a great question, I think, Carmen, you've raised. But, it's actually about the language itself. So one of the things that I'm very keen on us thinking about is, what language are we actually communicating in? I'm struck by the fact that we have so many people from so many different places around the world in this space, and we're still speaking in English. This is a drum that I beat over and over and over again. But the fact is, it limits, in thinking about, and thank you, Sarah, for sharing that article, because I think, it's that business of jargon and sort of the things that we take for granted in terms of how we communicate. But that more fundamental question of imaginations are inevitably limited by the fact that we communicate in English. So the ways in which I know the world, the things that I think about, are limited, by English. So there's so many things that we can think about in this space, but I'll stop there. But thanks again for the invitation, and it is really nice to be a part of this community, because there's just so many diverse people and ideas, like in the sense of being brought together around the question of knowledge. So yeah, so I'm also looking forward to the discussion. Thank you, and thanks, Navid, and thanks, Svrividya.
Thank you, Lata. So there was a question from Carmen also now.
Thank you, Lata.
And if you have any other questions, please do put it on the chat, and we will move on to the next section. So yeah, so the take on language, Navid, and what is your take on using knowledge for decolonization?
Okay. Yes, there are lots of restrictions that we can think about that. I think the first thing that we can think about that is that there are lots of restriction points, lots of painful, lots of problems in our way to decolonize knowledge, but we have only one reason, one goal, one common goal, and we have to achieve that. And it is about knowledge acquisition. If there is any asset in any part of the world, we can use this asset by different and diverse techniques for knowledge transferring and knowledge passing and knowledge acquisition. And you know that fortunately nowadays technology can help us by lots of systems for translating, for video conferencing, for something like subtitles, and we can overwhelm those items by our requirements, by our demands about knowledge. Yes, of course, I agree that it is exactly as Lot said. It is exactly a problem, but we can be successful. Yes, of course, as we did. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Navid. I'll hand over to Piers. So we will just go into breakout rooms now. And we heard Lata, we heard Navid. So let us now hear.
You're breaking up a bit, Svrividya.
Yeah. Yes, I can't hear you.
Please, right? So we are now not organizations. Piers?
Yeah, you were breaking up a bit. Let's move on to the next segment. We're going to go into breakout rooms. There are some comments and questions in the chat, so I think we can pick them up as we come back. And I see there is already some activity there. But just for sake of time, because we're running a bit behind. So what we're going to do, I'm just going to share my screen quickly. We're going to go into breakout. I'm just going to show you the Jamboard. We're going to jam. So you'll be put together in groups of 4 or 5. And by all means, if in your small group you can talk in any other language but English, please do so. Feel free to find a common language in the group. When you are in the Jamboard, let's just have a conversation and start putting sticky notes on what we can do as individual and in organization to support this process. If you're not familiar with Jamboard, don't worry, it's super easy. Svrividya will put the link in the chat, so you can open it from there. When you're on the jam, find the slide corresponding to your group. So if you're in group 1, go group 1. If you are group 3, go on to group 3, and you can just add sticky notes from the sidebar. So super intuitive, very easy, help each other. So you're going to be there for probably about 12 minutes because we are running a bit behind. And you'll be teleported in your breakout, and then after 12 minutes, teleported back here. All right. So I'm opening the room now. Enjoy your conversation, have fun, and yeah, let's jam together.
Oh, yes.
Hello, Kate. allocate.
Hi, I got disconnected.
Which group were you? Do you remember?
I was in group 3.
Group 3. Okay, I'm putting you back in there.
Right.
Can you see the breakout icon at the bottom? Okay, good. Yes, everybody's coming back in. Well, yeah, 12 minutes, maybe a bit too short, wasn't it?
It
A
was
bit brutal. A bit brutal. We'll try to have a bit longer time for the second round. Svrividya?
Yes, so thank you so much, Piers. I hope all of us had a very good conversation. Welcome back. So we are not going to have any plenary in the sense of, everybody presenting back what you talked about. But we do encourage you to please put it in your chats, any one big takeaway that you felt was very important that you discussed in your groups. There's some point that people made that you thought was wonderful, great. And if one or two of us wants to just share what we heard very quickly, we have time for that before we go on to the another one more exciting discussion around what we can do as a community, right? So do we have any volunteers? Please put your hands up if you want to share. Please use the chat function if you don't want to speak.
Yeah.
Yes, go ahead.
Svrividya, I shared a link about in our website that some of our endeavors are documented over there.
Okay, thanks so much, Navid. So if you want to hear more examples of what Navid was speaking about, please visit the links. In your, where you're posting your chat messages, after file, do you see those 3 dots? If you go there, you can actually save the chat. So if you want to save all the links that have been shared, please do that. You can save the chat file for future reference. So great. So let's move on to the next section. We want some very concrete ideas. I was just going through quickly the Jamboard. Some very, very strong suggestions coming there. Thank you so much for contributing. Please also have the same kind of inspired ideas for what we can do as a community. And to start off that conversation, I'm inviting Bruce Boyce from Australia, who is the editor, lead writer, and the director of the award-winning Real KM magazine. The thing is, I told Bruce is an Australian, but he's equally Chinese. That his country of love, and Australia his country of birth. So his expertise includes knowledge management, environmental management, project management, stakeholder engagement. So he's your management guru. He has many acclaims. He's, as I said, Real K Magazine is an award-winning resource. So please do subscribe. It's $77. I don't know about that. Yeah. And the magazine has done really good articles covering the Million Western Sydney River Recovery Program. It is led to the knowledge strategy process for Australia's 56 natural resource management NRM regional organizations, and many more. You can see that we keep sharing in the community links from KM Magazine. So over to you, Bruce, who is going to talk to us about cognitive bias, something that Lata was also talking about.
Okay, so I've just shared my screen with you. I'll just take the people away. So what I'm just going to do now is I'm just going to go through an article that I've posted onto Real KM magazine. I will send a link to this at the end of my short talk. But what this particular article does is it goes through what I consider to be some tangible suggestions that km4dev and Real KM magazine as well can look at taking forward to actually address the decolonisation of knowledge and KM. So I've divided the suggestions into 4 areas. So decolonising KM research, decolonising KM discussions, decolonising KM practice, and narrative disruption. So first of all, in regard to decolonising KM research, at the beginning of today's session, a map was put up showing how, in regard to knowledge management research, 2/3 of the research that's been done in regard to KM comes from just the 2 areas of North America and Europe. By stark contrast, there's very little research coming from, or that's come from Africa, South America, Central America, the Middle East, Central Asia, Southeast Asia, and Russia. So in regard to that, I've put forward 3 suggested actions. One is that the km4dev journal considers publishing a special issue on topics regarding the decolonisation of knowledge in KM, and there's already some examples of that from other fields. Second one there, 1.2, that the editorial team for km4dev journal considers aiming for a balanced global spread of editors, authors, articles, and peer reviewers across all issues. And 1.3, that km4dev and Real KM encourage other knowledge management journals, of which there are many, to do the same thing. Another factor in regard to research is the English language bias. And all through this article, I'm actually giving references from the research that give the evidence supporting what I'm saying. So I would encourage you to look at the references later. But again, it's found that the English language bias disadvantages researchers from the global south. So action 1.4 is aimed at addressing that in regard to km4dev journal, and action 1.5 is aimed at addressing that in regard to other KM journals. Then section 2 is decolonising KM discussions. As is the case with KM research, there are geographic and language biases in KM discussion forums. This is challenging to address for not-for-profits and small voluntary organisations. However, there's some pathways forward, and one is to look at adopting the approach used by the Integration and Implementation Insights blog, where they publish, where possible, articles in all of the languages spoken by their author contributors. And this, I think, could actually be done in the km4dev discussion forum, where somebody who's multilingual could post their comment in both, or in all of the languages that they are speaking. Another issue addressed there in 2.2 is that there can be a tendency for people with long-term experience in KM in the global north to talk over or talk down those with lived experience in the global south. And there are some resources in regard to lived experience and how that can be promoted. Item 3, decolonising KM practice. Based on the fact that most of the KM research comes from what's a very small part of the world, we're potentially missing out on alternative KM practices from the rest of the world. And I've given there 2 case studies from my own experience. One is Chinese electronics maker Xiaomi. And I was, as I was teaching Western approaches to my students in China, they confronted me with an approach from China that's actually more effective in achieving rapid lesson learning. So that's one example. Another is the knowledge management standard, which is considered to be globally universal. And what I say there is it's not, because, for example, China has its own standards that are better adapted for the local context in China. So there's a recommendation there about recognition of different approaches. Then there's another section there about technocratic and techno-scientific approaches in development, both of which suppress local knowledge. So I'll leave that for people to read later, but there's an action there to address that as well. Then the last section is what I call a narrative disruption. And what the research shows is that the coloniality of knowledge is based on narratives that have become persuasive right through society that are biased against particular parts of the world. And living in China, I've become acutely aware of that. And almost on a daily basis now, I'm confronted with biased narratives that tell an incorrect or inaccurate story about China. And I've been increasingly documenting those in Real KM magazine, and other people have been calling them out as well. We have Jerry Gray with us today on the call from Jerry's China, and I'll put the link to his Twitter account in the chat shortly. But Jerry's doing an amazing job of calling out a lot of these biased narratives against China. So that's the last section there is actions to deal with those biased narratives. So anyway, last bit there is references to what I've just said. So